Yo, welcome back to Star Spangled Gamblers. It's Keen Dog, your host. I'm with I guess I'm going to call it the all-star crew tonight. I see Pratik drinking a little bit of white tea out of a mug in a very uninspiring room. And I see someone, I think it's ISAVAGE, in front of some like rap graffiti murals and a Miller Lite. That's got to be ISAVAGE. You gonna holler at the boys?
What's going on, everybody? Great to be here. I miss being here. I missed a couple good episodes. I would have liked to have been on the conversation, and so good to be back.
Well, we respect your time, Savage, which is part of the reason why we don't ask you to be on every episode. But I'm respecting your face a little bit less because, it's going to be a surprise to people listening on audio, but you've got a blue Chicago Bulls hat on. Are you like a Crip? Like, what the fuck is that?
It's more of a, I guess you would say, a turquoise blue. I am a hat connoisseur, and I if I see something that a lot of people don't have, I will buy it. And then also, you can see like this shirt matches his hat really well. And when I saw the hat, I go, oh, I got a shirt that goes with that. And I will definitely buy a hat because it's part of a ensemble.
well, coincidentally, it also matches the Biggie Smalls mural behind you. Although your shirt, this is again terrible radio for the people who are listening, but your shirt looks like the Maryland flag. Like the color scheme is just a lot for me to wrap my mind around. So maybe you're simping for Larry Hogan to be the president in 2024.
Likely not, but anything would be an improvement from the Republican side from what they got right now. So good luck to them.
There we go. Usually this is when ISAVAGE gets on this podcast and he says, it's ISAVAGE coming from the left. And I'm like, no, dude, you're from the south side of Chicago. You have to be ISAVAGE coming from the south. It's
all the same, coming from the south side of Chicago, coming from the left, bringing that other perspective to the pod.
This is the fun part of this podcast is that it's the parts that we don't write that come into play. But I feel like coming from the south side of Chicago is very different from coming from, I live on the west side of Los Angeles. That's a very different type of Democrat. I'm not even going to say liberal. I don't even know if the south side of Chicago is liberal. It's just Democratic, right?
No, I mean, it is in most ways. I mean, like this is the thing about being from this area. And there's, I think there's still like this is when I get super upset when people talk about liberals are soy boys and
not there.
Everybody's like these guys in tight jeans and woke and all this different stuff. And it's like the liberals that I know, man, they're iron workers and guys that work for the railroad and guys that work at Ford and they're union guys and they're by extension Democrats. And I think that's gone away maybe a little bit. But for the most part, like I said, the Democrats I know are working guys in unions.
So this is something that's really interesting to me. Again, we're completely off script now. About California is you go by a union work site. And it doesn't matter where you are in Los Angeles, if you're, by where all the Democratic bundlers are in the Hollywood Hills, or if you're down in the ghetto or whatever, the first thing a union worksite does is put up a big American flag. And it's the only place in LA that you see American flags is where union workers are. So I don't know what that means, but it's always very telling to me the future of American politics because unions in California are very diverse. They're not, they're not your Trump white working class outside of Milwaukee.
No, you know what? There's a backstory to that a lot of times because going back to the early union days, union members were called communists and people were you're anti-American and all these different things. So that was really like a way to kind of diffuse that accusation of being anti-American because of being pro-union. So that's a method to that for sure.
I was going to say, on the topic of unions, do you have a pick for Secretary of Labor?
You're getting ahead of me. Can we give like a eulogy to like what we do here, Pratik? You're going to fucking blow me up for that.
Okay.
This is Star Spangled Gamblers. We talk about politics for the purposes of making money, but we're also very devoted to like the weird and the why of things that no one cares about except for us, the people who bet on politics. So Pratik is doing the right thing. He's trying to get us to the part where we actually bring value to our listeners. Before we do that, so Pratik wants to talk about who's going to be the Secretary of Labor, but this is what this episode's going to be. It's Christmas time. Ho, ho, ho. Everyone on this podcast will get to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays at some point. So we're going to talk about the Golden Modelos, and that's our award show for those of you who are hardos for the best moments in political gambling of the last year. And we're going to talk about one or two markets that are topical. It's a very prestigious award. Actually, Savage, did you win it? I don't think you've ever won a Golden Modelo, have you?
I have not. I haven't even had the honor of being nominated, so I can't even act like I'm being magnanimous on that one. But the money makes the fall a lot easier. So that's true. That's true. It's like, would you rather be Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man 4, or would you rather be the person in the indie movie cinema that made like $15 to win that Oscar for Moonlight or La La Land or whatever? You're clearly Robert Downey Jr. He's got both. So he got one back in the day too. So you know, he's got the best of both worlds. So maybe that's what everybody should aspire to.
Yeah. All right. So Pratik, what's the fake news market, Biden's cabinet, that we still don't know the answer to because he wants to nominate someone who's white and male, but he's kind of fucked on that?
No, yeah. Well, I was curious, building off your union comments, if you had a view on Secretary of Labor. I mean, I think the point that you and Alex were making actually is part of the dilemma here, right? That as the Democratic Party drifts from its union, labor, blue collar roots and becomes more of a limousine liberal party, I would think that kind of a dilemma really shows up in how Biden thinks through the Secretary of Labor pick.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's also the aspect that most unions today are not necessarily labor unions. There's teachers unions, nurses unions, police, fire, and a lot of that really plays in because the labor, the labor movement isn't what it used to be. So he's really getting pulled a lot from a little bit more of the, I guess you could say, a lot bigger, more powerful. So that's where I think that, trying to get somebody from the more of the workers union vein is also pulling in that direction. I think that, anybody who's been mentioned, I think has the qualifications, and I haven't heard really pushback from anybody to say that person's not, from the right view or anything like that. So I think this is one that whoever he picks is going to be pretty well received. The only thing people are going to be mad at the constituencies who are trying to get, representation out of it. But I haven't heard anybody saying, this person would be a bad pick because they're not strong enough. And
I haven't really messed with this market since the very beginning. And at the very beginning, I sort of bought who I thought that the president and the vice president would want. So I bought Julie Su at 16 cents. I think she's the head of the California Labor Department or whatever. And I thought, Kamala's got to get someone in this cabinet and someone who's not going to threaten her. And there's some sort of identity politics thing. So Julie Su might be a good buy. And then I bought Marty Walsh because I was like, well, Politico reported that was Biden's favorite guy and he's the mayor of Boston and he's Irish, just like Biden. Basically, I just bought the two people that the VP and the president would want to have a beer with. And for some reason, Julie Su is up to 51 cents right now, and Marty Walsh is down to 2. And I can't even tell you why, but that seems to be the way it's going. I don't know, Patrick Gaspard, Jenny Yang. I don't even know who they are. Is that a real thing?
Movement there has come from that Gaspard guy, I guess, left his current position, and there was a lot of heat around him joining. He popped up pretty high for a while there and has settled back down. The movement now is based on there being a push to get more Asian representation in the cabinet. So that's why Julie Su has really taken the kind of the juice lately. That's who they're kind of pushing specifically. I wasn't in on her, unfortunately, at the cheap side like you were, because I had said early on, I thought that there were a lot of names getting drawn out of California, and I saw that she was another Californian, and I was like, man, how much can one state lose in terms of their high up positions? It seems like she's at least got the juice right now. Yeah, no, I see people shitposting in the comments that she sucks and they hate her. I have no idea why, but she keeps making me money, so I love Julie Su. I mean, she's above 50 cents now, so that's... Do you want to hear something funny about California politics and people who are Asian? You're like, oh my God, King Dog. I don't know. Usually when somebody says, do you want to hear something funny about an ethnicity? It's usually about to be something racist. So no. Well, it might be, but I actually don't think it is, because I sort of have led you into this trap. So I've made no mistake or left no secret about the fact that I'm a big left coast conservative. And when I go vote in California, there's so many offices and so many ballot initiatives that I have no idea about, even though I represent myself as knowing. And if I ever see someone who has a Korean last name, Julie Su does not have a Korean last name,
I vote for that person and that thing every time because I know that the Korean on the ballot is going to be the most conservative person. So I can look at Julie Sue's last name and I'm like, you're not Korean. You are not a Republican, but I'll bet on you. I just won't vote for you.
I didn't know that. Okay.
There you go. Welcome to California.
Yeah.
I don't know. So does anyone have anything interesting to say about this, or can we start fucking betting on the Golden Modelos too?
No, Secretary of Labor is not one that I got in on too early with a good horse to run with. So I am not the.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the lingering cabinet markets are AG and Commerce.
So Doug Jones and one of Kamala's husband's golf buddies, and then whatever's left over for the Secretary of Labor. I think Biden's just been saving his like white male cards and has been trying to play them in, the places that matter to him. So I'm pretty locked in on Doug Jones for AG, and Secretary of Commerce I don't think even matters, and Secretary of Labor maybe I should just sell because my horses are doing well right now.
Well, I'll put it like this. This strategy is not the best now because everybody has kind of popped a little bit. But my successful strategy, and you can still do this in these two if you aren't there already. Even though it's 94, 95 cents, you'd be able to get it at 93. Max no against whoever's currently there right now under Trump, and then try to be quick on the button to get no on whoever doesn't get picked by because if somebody's sitting there at 20 cents and you can do a combination no on the Trump holder and then snag 20 cent or 80 cent no's on whoever doesn't get picked at the time, that's a nice little combination. Again, it was a lot better when they were sitting at 88, 87. It's still a decent way to play it because, like I said, if you're quick on the button, you happen to get the news at this, before anybody else, while everybody else is rushing to buy yes on the person who gets named. If you're buying no on everybody else, you might get. Well,
why don't you offer some incremental value to our listeners? What is the secret to getting that information before anyone else has it?
I'm glad you asked. Let's see. Look, this is my phone all day long. Alerts, Twitter alerts, all day long. I follow 900 people and have alerts for most of them. So if the news comes out first, and you happen to get it first, you can snag somebody just on knowing something. So
but do you set the alert by the user? Like you're like, I follow this one reporter who has the beat on this, and you set an alert 100%. For that account?
100%. My phone looks like a stock ticker all day long. So if I'm sitting here working, typing something up or on a Zoom meeting or whatever else, I'm just scrolling through, seeing what's coming through. And sometimes you can see breaking Biden picks so-and-so, and you're the first one to see it. Man, there's 40-cent shares still on the table, 50-cent shares still on the table. Just the other day, when the news came out about maybe pushing back Holland and Fudge to pass March, there were no's sitting on both of them in the teens. Right when that alert came across, I looked at it, I screened the article. It said pass March 1st. I bought thousands of no's on both of them in the teens just for getting the alert first. We had
one of our users, Dave L. I won't disclose the rest of his name, but he's like, yeah, I set stop losses for Holland at 15 cents or it's like someone who like you bought up all their shares. Like, oh God, this game's brutal. It's not kind to you.
Yeah.
So, I guess his loss.
Look, you get caught on the wrong side of that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the game. Does anyone on this podcast, because it's Christmas, I want to put my feet up. I'm from Kentucky. I live in California. I'm from Kentucky. I want to have a bourbon. It's going to taste like herbs and sugar and like burnt orange rind. That's going to be an old fashioned on Christmas Eve by myself, mind you, because of the coronavirus. Cry a tear for me. Does anyone have anything interesting to say about the Secretary of Commerce? This is a very mercurial market.
I said it before on the last pod. I'm highly skeptical that Gina Raimondo wants to leave her governorship early. I think she would have done it obviously if she had been the VP. But she knows that whether it's now or in the future, she can go into an executive branch appointment whenever she wants to. So I don't know why she would leave prematurely rather than finishing up her governor term. If you saw too, when the rumors were floating earlier about her in a different cabinet position, she called a press conference and just flatly
and a meaningful one
to that rumor.
The Secretary of Health and Human Services. The Secretary of Commerce does nothing other than fly on private jets with rich people from other countries. Like, they have no policy input at all.
Oh, I mean, they really try to fuck with the census as Ross tried to do, and they fake hurricane data like he did too. But that's one thing that's honestly something I really learned from the Trump administration is how much can be done by a cabinet secretary through, without legislation at all, through policy enforcement or based on kind of preference. Man, he did a lot. DeVos did a lot, like without any legislation to do changes in there. So, I mean, that was really informative, I would say.
Well, but I've said this before in this podcast, and I'll say it again. The way that the White House works since, I don't know, call it Lyndon Johnson, is the president does whatever he wants, and Congress can either pass a bill to stop him, or the courts can advance some sort of case to a very high level and stop him. Like, it's just very like but there's always been like a level of trust before Trump that like the abuse of law and policy would be somewhat minimal instead of like, I just really care about myself and the rest of you can go to hell.
So, like, with that being said, I feel like I agree with Pratik. I don't think that I'm no on Raimondo right now. I could be wrong, but I feel like if you turn down Health and Human Services, you're not going to say, okay, Commerce. If that was really the case, and also I kind of don't think that he's going to do this olive branch and name a Republican either. Again, I could be wrong, but I just don't think it's that era anymore either. I don't think that because of so much that could be done through cabinets, I think that it would be really, I don't want to say risky, but it really might alienate people by putting somebody in there who might, an agenda around that's a little more right than what people would be comfortable with. So,
well, can I ask you two important questions about that? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you both of them before we get sidetracked?
Okay.
All right. So question one about that is, this is like in a sort of radius versus diameter nature. The first question is that indicative of the fact that White Houses run most of their policy through their like senior staff and their political staff, and the cabinet's kind of window dressing?
So, I mean, I'll put it like this. I don't think that cabinet secretaries do anything that the president doesn't also agree with. But I also think that they can sway the president to say, this is what I want. This is what I want my policy to be in this area. I mean, like I said, I don't think Donald Trump he has no knowledge of how public education works, how higher education works, how, what the nuances of any of these policies are. But I think if Betsy DeVos came to him and said, hey, I want to do this, he'd say, okay. So I think it's a two-way street in that. And then he could also go to her and say, I want to do this. And she'd kind of have to.
But I'm sort of asking, I'm asking the opposite question, which is, and this might actually, like, Pratik, I feel like you've probably written like a 475 page long treatise as a ghostwriter in someone else's name about this. But like, it's more of a question of, are governments now run by the president's senior staff, who is formerly the president's political staff, and like the cabinet picks are just like the random people who they pay by the hour to execute what the political staff says?
So my read on that is that it's highly dependent on the president. And there are a lot of different models on how to do that. I think it comes down to a few different factors. I think one is, how much direct presidential control does the president even want to have over the agencies? And you've seen that vary quite a bit. I mean, Ronald Reagan basically at times sort of probably didn't know all that much of what was going on in certain agencies. On the other hand, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton had a more hands-on approach. So that's one thing. I think another is a big part of it comes down to how presidents decide on how they're going to do personnel. So if you give your cabinet secretary free rein to hire whoever they want, that's obviously going to be a different dynamic from one in which you have the cabinet secretary, but where lower level appointments are going through the White House. So I don't know that there's any kind of trend in any one direction or the other. I think a lot of it just has to do with how the president decides to run their government.
No, the only thing I was going to add to that is I think the one thing that you're saying was kind of proven by Trump is that, I think in a lot of ways, Stephen Miller was a de facto Homeland Security Secretary, because I think that whatever Stephen Miller cooked up worked its way into Trump's, Trump's priorities. And then that got filtered to telling his various Department of Homeland Security people to do this, you know what I mean? And so I think that does go to, the president's inner circle can influence the cabinet holders' decisions. But then, like I said, I also think it's a two-way street, that somebody can go to him and say, hey, I want to do this. And if he doesn't feel one way or the other about it, then I think that they get their prerogatives met too. So it's kind of both.
But okay, so now I'm going to get to section 2 of this question, which I think will eventually have a bettable insight, but we might have to wait a couple months for it to come to fruition. But I really want to talk about the Golden Modelos. Is that issue of whether or not, and it irks me to an enormous degree that there's not a way to bet on this directly on Predict It, is the issue of whether or not Joe Biden will put a Republican on his cabinet a function of the fact that the Democratic Party has gotten too large. The tent has gotten too big. There are too many people to fit inside of the tent, and now someone has to stand out in the rain. And, because of accommodating all the needs of the different factions in the Democratic Party, there will not be a Republican on his cabinet, which seemed like the type of thing that a person like Joe Biden would have done, in 2008, had he been the president.
Well, there is a way to bet on it in part, I guess, if you look at the commerce market. Meg Whitman trading at 11 cents. So, there's not a decent amount of money to be made there. I guess I agree, though, with what you're saying. I mean, I would have thought for sure that Biden would continue a precedent of having at least one Republican cabinet member. And I don't really know what it would cost him politically. I mean, I think there's no question that the margins he has, that he won in the 2020 elections were in large part due to Republican or Republican-leaning defectors. And I mean, especially if he were to take a strategy of, okay, having a John Kasich type of cabinet head, but then staffing the agency with Democratic appointees, I don't know what that would exactly cost him. So if it turns out that he ends up having a straight party cabinet going into his first term, that would be surprising to me.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's where, somebody like, I wish Kasich was on that market, because I actually think he would probably be priced pretty high. So Predict It, add Kasich to the commerce market if this doesn't get closed by then, because I don't think he would get it, to be honest. I think a lot of what you're saying is true, Pratik. I think that also there are people who would just get very up in arms about it. I think, obviously Kasich was an anti-Trump guy. He's on the range of things would be a road Republican. But some people on the left would to me, and this is things that I would have against him as a Democrat, it would be, he's super anti-abortion. He did a lot to suppress votes as governor, suppress voter rights, and to say this is somebody we want to put in the cabinet. Yeah, he was supportive of Biden. He's a moderate, regular Republican guy, but he's got a record that a lot of Democrats would say, couldn't you give it to somebody who doesn't have these things in their background? But that's the pushback I think that he would get.
So do you think Meg Whitman's a non-starter?
So the thing is with Meg Whitman is that she doesn't have an enacted policy record. She's never really held elected office. I think she's got probably statements that she's made, and she's probably, when she was running before. But Kasich has things that he's done that are, again, the antithesis of a lot of Democratic principles. That's just where I think that some people would think that, for a lot of the same reason, like it was very easy for me to buy no on Rahm Emanuel. He just had, he had some things that were really just going to be a non-starter for Democrats, because, I mean, look, man, he covered up a police shooting to benefit himself politically. That was not going to fly. And that was, again, that would have nothing to do with what he would do policy-wise. It was just, this is a road we won't let you cross. Again, that's just where I think that if he were to nominate a Republican, it would probably have to be somebody who maybe did not hold office before, but somebody who, maybe was a registered Republican like Whitman.
I mean, here's what I don't get about Joe Biden, and you can tell me if I'm missing something. I've been surprised now in two different ways with Biden. The first is that when you look at Bernie Sanders and then the larger movement that Sanders had both this time around and when he ran in 2016, I mean, Sanders showed that he and his followers are a formidable force in the party. I mean, and it's easy to forget now, but he came very, very close at both times to getting the nomination. So I would have thought that Biden would do much more than he has to keep those people in the tent. For example, when he was doing his VP thing, I mean, even if he was ultimately intent on having a Kamala type of person, I would have thought they would have kept, if not Bernie himself, someone of that wing of the party in the conversation. I would have thought too with the cabinet agencies so far, same kind of thing. Even if you're not picking someone from the Bernie wing of the party, you put the olive branch out there. So he spent, I think, a great deal of political capital to basically kick that wing of the party to the side. Now, it seems to me if you're going to do that, then probably if you want a serious governing coalition, you really try to drive home support among these suburban whites, et cetera, who may be default Republican, but were triggered by Trump. I would think the easiest way you can do that at basically no political cost is to find some moderate anti-Trump Republicans, stick them at a cabinet position, and basically signal that you want to build a coalition in that way. He hasn't done a lot of that either, and it's particularly then kind of weird to me that he's really going all in with the identity politics thing. I mean, I think he had absolutely no obligation to pick Haaland this time around for cabinet head. I mean, it's been a total kind of affirmative action thing going on. So I don't quite get what the political calculus here is.
I think two things. I think that and I've said this before too. I don't look at all these picks as affirmative action picks. I think that you really do. There is value, intrinsic value that comes from a viewpoint and experiences that you can't get from maybe necessarily experience in a job that somebody else had. So, and I also think that this goes back to what we were saying earlier. A lot of the cabinet. A lot of the function of cabinets is a lot more of ideology than necessarily management. And I think that kind of plays into it too. So I think that, Haaland is definitely maybe on the lower end of the experience thing. And I see the argument that everybody was making along the way there, but I also think that the value in what she brings to the room when decisions are being made can't always be quantified in years of service in a related job.
I trip over like the Pod Save America crowd on that nomination, probably on everything. Like I hear people say, Arizona went towards the Democrats by 10,000 or 11,000 votes or something like that. And the reason why was that the Navajo Nation or, whatever voted for Joe Biden. But like my feeling is that like affirmative action and identity politics are still very controversial in this country. I live in the state of California. People widely view the state of California as the most liberal state in the United States. The state of California by voter, referendum, rejected an affirmative action plebiscite by 14%. So I'm like, and this is sort of how I'm thinking. Like I'm like, maybe the Biden administration is a little behind the times. Like people get creeped out by stuff like this, and that the price you pay. I don't think anyone cares about who the Secretary of the Interior is. I think ultimately maybe Joe Biden made the right choice because the Secretary of the Interior is such an austere and remote thing from people's lives that the press release is worth what it's worth. But that there's not really that many more votes to be won by making choices based on identity, because people by and large in this country get kind of creeped out by choices based on identity. And that's for the podcast that was supposed to be about the Golden Modelos. So
I know. So here's my thing too, and this is the way I was looking at this. And again, I said this before. It's people when he picked Kamala Harris, and it was like, oh, we only picked her because she's a woman or a person of color, this and that. But it's like at the same time, she has the resume of people who have been vice president before. You know what I mean? She's high-level jobs in a big state, senator, experience, this and that. So I could see if they're picking a nobody and just trying to check boxes and things like that. But everybody he's picked, somebody who's been in a cabinet position before has had that resume or less. So that's the other thing is that, while he's, it might look like he's trying to meet quotas. I also think that there's the push to say, normally I would pick Udall, but I'm not going to pick Udall because let me look at somebody else who I might not have otherwise looked at, who's going to add value to, this whole national conversation and decision-making process. And I think that goes to anybody who he's picking for a cabinet role who's not a white male, because as cabinets have been, if you look through the history, obviously, the white male cabinet members have been overly dominated in history. And that could be because for all these decades, that's all who was really looked at. So to say, let's look at people with similar resumes who we might not have looked at otherwise, that's a good way to go through the process to me.
Well, the question, though, for like anything in America, whether it's a corporate entity, a government entity, is how long will people like Tom Udall just tolerate being overlooked? Because, if you like, he's like clearly the most qualified person for the role, and someone else who's trying to raise venture capital is clearly the most qualified person to get that money. And there's only a certain amount of time that they're willing to be overlooked in the name of some like social good before, this is how religions fall apart. This is when, Martin Luther nails the 95 Theses to the door because he has to send money to Rome to raise cash for some fake project. This is always when it goes kaput, is that when people are asked to do things against their own self-interest, that's when they stop doing it.
Do you guys have a view on this theory, I guess, that Holland and or Fudge won't get through by the deadline?
I bet big on that, and I held. Like I said, I was lucky to get some cheap shares on both of those for no. To me, honestly, still they're in the 40s right now. I think that somebody, if they want to build up a slow position on that, because it's probably going to stay that until something gets announced. They basically said, this is how we want to do things, and here's our path. And my whole thing on that, everybody's like, well, they got an 11 vote cushion. They're not going to, delay these for 6 weeks just to hold 2 votes. But if you only got a 6 vote cushion or 8 vote cushion, whatever it might be, AOC.
That's 6 out of 200.
Yeah, AOC, Presley, Bush, Bowman, Tlaib, and Omar, that becomes the strongest voting bloc in Congress. And until you have a little bit more cushion above that 6, they can make a lot of demands to be in legislation that Biden and Pelosi probably aren't comfortable with. So they really, I think, would prioritize keeping 2 votes that would be a little bit outside of that realm over having somebody in, middle of March versus middle of February.
And don't forget the Abigail Spanbergers and Abby Finkenauers who would vote the other way too. Like they're pinned between a lot of rocks and only one hard place.
And they're going to be. Finkenauer's gone. So.
Oh wait, did she lose?
Yeah.
Dude, that was a huge loss for them. I thought she had a huge career.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Honestly, I think that's I'm obviously animated about this because I've got a good hand there at cheap. Again, some of your cabinet isn't going to be approved till March anyway. So you might as well have it be people who you need to keep in where they are strategically, and they'll get in eventually. Trade rep gets in before interior.
Yeah. Well,
so
China's more important than North Dakota right now.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, so I don't have Holland shares. I do have some yes on Fudge in the 80s. Should I just kind of get rid of those now, or should I wait until something happens now?
I'll say it the same way. This is kind of how I do things sometimes, where it looks like something is going to stay kind of the same until the picture gets more clear. Depends on how much you got. If I was in that position, I've been in that position, I unwind that kind of slowly. I'll sell 25 here and there because you dump the whole thing and then it swings back the other way. You feel like shit. But if you feel like it's going to be, 45 for, if there's going to be some stability there, but it looks like it's going to go, the wrong way, what your position is. When I'm in that position, I unload that slowly rather than all at once. Unless you really feel like it's going to go the other way, sell it and jump in on the other side.
God bless. All right. So we're talking about all these Senate confirmations and who's you what's for positions that most people in America will never really hear about or care about. The question that people actually care about is, are there going to be Republican senators who literally stand in front of the door in the White House and try and keep Joe Biden out of it? Like, are people going to challenge the results of this election? I know, for example, Tommy Tuberville, who has lost a lot of Auburn football games in the month of November, is going to challenge whether or not Trump lost an election in November. Or is he? Like, is this a real possibility that there's going to be challenges to the election that I think we know what the result was, come January? And are we betting on it?
Yeah. So here's me. I'm yes on that, and there's a lot of ways to bet yes on that. And here's where I'm coming from. If you think of that, it's well known now. Everybody's seen the scene before when Gore lost, and he's really calmly, House members are coming up there and saying, well, no senator signed on to this challenge, and he's calling them out of order, and no senators are signing on. I have no concept of it going that way at all, with Pence standing in front of Mo Brooks, shutting down a Republican who's trying to challenge something for Trump. I can't even picture that. All I can picture is somebody being very willing to sign on to that challenge, because it's the last thing that they have left. If you've seen the desperation since the election happened, and then you're going to say, oh, this last chance, nobody's going to jump on it because of some fealty to Mitch McConnell. I just don't see it.
Well, isn't that the point, though? I mean, who is the somebody?
Yeah. I think so. So here's my thing. I think that it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be an easy thing to do when it comes down to it. And I think that I'll put it like this. There are some real true believers. And I think that some people haven't even been talked about yet. Like MARSHA Blackburn, I think is a true
she's the worst.
believer.
The worst.
I don't think that, Rand Paul does this Rand Paul does this for political expediency. Lindsey Graham does this for political expediency. Cruz, all these people. She's a believer. And so I think that, when it comes down to it, she might be one. I think that Tuberville might be one. I think that once somebody does, because here's what I really feel like it comes down to. It's just going to be a protest anyway. And I think that what Mitch McConnell, he's smart. What he's telling everybody to do is don't make a commitment to something now that Trump can blow up later anyway. And I think that if anybody makes that decision, it's going to come in the week before. Why would you say something on, December 19th that 10 days from now, Trump can say, forget it, I'm resigning because I'm tired of this shit. And then you just put yourself on the line for no reason. I don't think he's going to do that. But I'm just saying, I think that Mitch is saying, don't commit to something that you might not have to do anyway.
Right. That's a very Mitch thing to do.
It's funny you mentioned Blackburn. I heard just recently from a reliable source that she is gearing up to run for president and is already kind of hiring political staff to that end. So for what it's worth.
Pratik breaking news.
Yeah.
So bad.
Well, I wouldn't even say it if I didn't believe the source, but it's
it's so bad though. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I've had to work with her before. I
used to watch her when she would show up on the Sunday shows before she was a senator. I just could not believe she sounded like an older relative that is whatever. That's different. Detached from reality, but okay.
No, but that's true. No, that's 100% true. That's 100% true. I used to work. Sorry to cut you off. This is my show. Fuck off.
No, please don't say bad personal stuff you know about Blackburn.
I worked as a staffer, and as you know, there's nothing lower in life than being a political staffer. I don't want to put that on a pedestal, but I had this great idea for some, everyone in politics is always trying to come up with a way to do things less formally. Well, how can we reach more people? How can we lower the barriers to entry? So I came up with this idea for a way we could talk about manufacturing in America. And it was great. We wound up doing it, but it was MARSHA fucking Blackburn had to read every line of the text and sign off on every little thing, because the only person MARSHA Blackburn ever thought about was herself. And it was just embarrassing. Anything MARSHA Blackburn contributed to the entire thing was just a joke, and we all had to just bite our tongue and roll our eyes, because no one fucking loves themselves more than a shitty politician, and MARSHA Blackburn's a shitty politician. And now she's a U.S. senator, and apparently she's going to run for president, and I fucking ISAVAGE, I'll be on your side if that's what the election is.
Yeah, man. That's so. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, what, I mean, you guys feel the same. I mean, can you really see that happening of just nobody stepping up and saying,
No. You don't need to worry about that.
No, but I mean, here's the thing. I think there are two issues with that analysis. I think number one is that you need to be in a really, really deep red state if you're a senator and you're hoping to get reelected statewide and basically go all in on a position like this. I mean, in the vast majority of these places, you need to build a coalition of moderate Republicans, independents, and even some Democrats. So I think that if you're thinking about people like even Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, et cetera, the politics are actually quite difficult. I also think too that when you think about who these
why
people
would Rand
are,
Paul challenge the election? By the way, that doesn't make sense to me. ISAVAGE. I think that's fake news.
Two things. I think he's an ideologue. I think that it's an ideologue to the point.
True. Trump's
an ideologue to the point where he's somebody who I think would do it for the protest aspect of it. Of we know that there was irregularities or whatever it might be, and that's what I think is going to end up being eventually anyway. Is just they know it's going to go nowhere, but to not do it would unnecessarily piss off people that they're better to have in your camp than not. And because I don't think that it's going to be. I don't think anybody's worried about if I don't do this, I'm going to get primaried, or I don't think they think they're going to lose their career over it. But there's a segment of people who they need to keep in their camp. The cost benefit analysis is going to be, I don't want the angry emails from these people. I don't want them to call me a rhino. So I'm just going to be the one to do it.
Okay, so doesn't the ideologue thing though go the other direction too, which is to say, whatever you want to think of Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, et cetera. I mean, these are people who are legal professionals. In the case of Rand Paul, I mean, there are people who believe strongly in the rule of law and so forth. I know that one doesn't necessarily want to bet on the kind of morality of the Republican Party in this era, but I think you have to figure at some point that a combination of political self-interest and just the fact that they don't want to totally kind of trash the Constitution, totally make a circus of Washington. There has to be some measure here of restraint. Yeah.
So but that's also why I think that it's to me, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be an easy thing to do because nobody thought that Barbara Boxer was destroying democracy when she did it in 2005. They knew what it was. It was a protest, and it was something that was done to highlight what she saw as irregularities in Ohio and suppression in Ohio. And she did it, and they went through with it, and nobody's thought about it for fucking 16 years. And, and I think the same thing would happen with this. I think,
but I don't think anyone was paying attention back then. That's it. Like politics was less performative in 2004, 2005. And to me, that's why Republicans, by the way, could talk themselves into doing this. Like, well, it's just part of politics. Like, it's just what we do. It's like, no, that actually matters, dude. It could go both ways, but I don't think anyone cared that Barbara Boxer did it in 2004 because it was just some internal Senate thing. It wasn't like a national thing.
I mean, it's 2004. It wasn't, 1924. I mean, they had the internet back then and cable news and all that. But I mean, I agree. It is more performative now, but I mean, I think that's also, to me leads more to it happening because of, again, everybody wants to be the person who is getting clips played of them on the Mark Levin show and Sean Hannity calling them a hero. And, this person is a true American. And I mean, there's so much capital in that. There's so much capital in that because of, they really wag the dog these days, man. They really make demands on people that filter the way up to the top.
Well, we're sort of running over ground that we ran over last week, but to me, it's like still a question of who's up in 2022, and the people who are up in 2022 just don't look like unless James Lankford in Oklahoma is like worried that he's going to get primaried or something. It's just like what are like Jerry Moran, Rand Paul, and Chuck Grassley really? It's not like a slate of Republicans who are in deep red danger zone.
I mean, Alex,
Tommy Tuberville is my only concern, really.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Alex, about Tuberville. I think he's the one guy.
My name's Keen Dog, by the way.
Individuals. Yeah. I mean, among the individuals for whom there is a market on predicted, I think he's definitively the guy who has he has politically, it wouldn't cost him anything to do this. But I guess the question is for
I don't think
first term elected. Yeah. I mean, the question is like, does he have to fear McConnell being a newly elected member? Presumably,
I don't know. I mean, this is so like I was literally talking to the Queen Dog. That's a female who's a member of my life. And I was like, I need to start watching more C-SPAN because I just don't feel like I understand the nature of these politicians the way I used to. But like James Lankford, when he was in the House and I was working in the House, like he wasn't a like there was nothing especially conservative or reactionary about James Lankford. He was kind of like a middle 50% member of Congress. So to me, like, I don't necessarily feel like he's worried about right-wing primaries or he's, particularly concerned about, whether he does or doesn't challenge this vote. I just don't think it's relevant. And then, like, keep in mind, again, that amicus brief that half of the House of Representatives signed, 0 senators signed, not a single one. To me, the question is, will a Tommy Tuberville challenge this election? Or will he not? Because I'm stumped to think of who the person is who will.
I got a yes on Loeffler also. I think that she's going to have to make a commitment.
I kind of like that. I think she's going to have to get on record to do it at some point. It's early-ish. It's the 19th when we're talking about this, but that's what everybody's focused on right now, and that's what everybody's pressing on. And if she keeps getting asked about it, I think that Trump is going to see the opportunity to say, Loeffler, are you going to do this or not? And I'll put it like this. She might not end up doing it because it's going to be after her election, but at some point she might have to make the commitment to do it because of pressure. And she has a 100% voting record with Trump. She has voted with him more than any other, even Republican senator, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I'm buying no on Loeffler signing on to this. You can get it right now in the mid 70s. I mean, I think that buying no is safe at least until her election. I don't know why she would play around with this in a close election with a lot of moderate Republicans and independents who she has to win over. Maybe after the elections you sell that off.
She might know she's not going to win them. Because guess what? They didn't win in November. Moderate Republicans and independents.
Are you willing to buy the other side of that?
I don't know. The truth is, I think I said at the beginning of this podcast that I've been sort of hacky and disengaged from it. So like right now I'm reading the rules of this market to see if there's, a classic thing in Congress would be for someone to introduce a, resolution to do what we're describing and then to withdraw it, to just sort of like, I rise to challenge so-and-so. And then the ranking member or the majority leader to say, well, do you really intend to do this? And then to say, no, actually I don't. And then to go away. So I'm sort of looking at a rules cuck, but I drank a Modelo at the beginning of this podcast thinking we were going to talk Golden Modelos, but it sounds like we're not, boys.
We're going to get there. So here's my last word on this. And it's easy thinking for me. I think it's going to come and go and be a very easy decision to make. And I don't think it's going to be anything that when it comes down to it is going to be seismic. I think it's going to be done in protest. It's going to come and go and be fine. And the other thing is at the same time, I think the fever pitch to get it done is going to get way, way stronger up into it. I think that it's going to be an untenable position for some people to not do it because of the pressure that's going to come. Because it's literally, like I said, it's the last thing that they have left, and nobody's going to let the last chance just come and go. It's, if you have any finger on the pulse of the people who still think Trump can win this, is a lot of them, and they're desperate, and they're going to put pressure on people who can at least put up a fight.
It's so dark.
Yeah, I'm going to say buy no on all the individuals other than Tuberville. I think stay out of that one. I also think, maybe someone like Blackburn might get in, but at least for now, I'm okay with buying that no senators are going to jump on this.
All right. Well, there you have it. You can judge us by history or reward us by the facts. That's a very politician-y thing to say. What does that even mean?
There we go. This is, I think this is the most controversy between me and Pratik since we've done this together, and our blood pressure barely got up talking about it. Well, real even keeled about strong disagreements.
Listen, the most controversial thing you've ever done is wear a blue Bulls hat. That's literally the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like you should move to like Detroit or Indianapolis for doing that. That's just embarrassing. Or maybe Atlanta. That would be really bad.
The coordination was what made it worth it.
No. But it's completely fake news. It's like, well, I coordinated I'm like a bishop in the Catholic Church, and I coordinated my cross, and it's upside down, but it looks good. Like that's not.
Can you see that there's gold on the hat too, and there's a little gold on the shirt?
Yeah, like I can see it. The problem is that the person on it makes no sense.
When you see two things like that go together, well, that's what I do at least.
Okay, well, this has been Star Spangled Gamblers. It's actually not a fashion podcast, despite what ISAVAGE might be telling us. I'm Keen Dog. I'm your host. I guess next week we'll get to the Golden Modelos, or maybe in a couple days before the new year. I hope you've enjoyed this. Do you want to like sign off and say hello and goodbye to your lovers and your friends? Drum roll.
Bye.
Oh, that was Pratik being a creep. Weirdo.
Shout out to my trading group. Everybody knows who they are.
How do I get in?
Group. If people knew who was in this trading group, it would blow their minds. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. All right. So just you, your imaginary friend, and like your dog.
That's it. And I tell you what, I'm going to give a shout out to somebody who's going to appreciate it, I hope. Big fan of Star Spangled Gamblers, Eli Braden, who is one of my favorite people. And shout out to Eli Braden, who is probably listening to this.
Oh yeah, let's holler at him. We'll get him on the show. I talked to him. We're gonna get Eli on the show. All right, guys, you're awesome. Good night. We're Star Spangled Gamblers. Come back next time.